They provoke you. You react. They win. It happens every day. The moment someone can pull emotion from you, anger, panic, desperation, they've already taken control. Machiavelli knew this centuries ago. The man who cannot be emotionally moved cannot be moved at all. He becomes a fortress, a storm no one can shake. Emotional immunity isn't about feeling nothing, it's about revealing nothing. When you master this, you don't just resist attack, you make others collapse under the weight of their own emotions. This is how you become untouchable. The world is full of men who are almost powerful, almost respected, almost feared, and they lost it the moment they let someone get to them. A single outburst, a moment of desperation, a visible flinch in a silent room. That's all it takes. One crack in your armor, and the people around you don't see strength anymore. They see blood, and once they smell it, they press harder. They test you. They provoke more. Not because they want to understand you, but because they now believe they can. Machiavelli would have warned you. The cost of being affected is not just momentary embarrassment, it's strategic collapse. The moment someone sees what shakes you, they will use it. Not once, not directly, but again and again, quietly, subtly, until you are cornered. Because emotion is not private, it spills. And when it spills, it stains your image. That image, the one that once held presence and control, becomes hollow. You go from commanding to explaining, from still to spiraling, from untouchable to owned. It does not take much. A raised voice, a nervous laugh, a desperate explanation. All signals that your internal world is under siege. And in power, perception is reality. You may recover later. You may explain yourself. You may say it was just one moment. But the damage is done, because no one remembers what you said. They remember that you cracked. The most powerful men don't just control the room. They control themselves. They have trained every muscle, every breath, every twitch of the face to stay still under pressure. Not because they're emotionless, but because they know the second they show emotion, they hand their opponents the playbook. Emotional exposure is leverage for someone else. Emotional silence is leverage for you. This is the first rule of becoming untouchable. Never let them see where to strike. Hide your anger. Swallow your need to correct. Let the insult pass without flickering. You are not stone, but you must look like stone. And when they realize you cannot be moved, they stop trying. They start shifting. They start fearing. Because in the world of control, the man who cannot be shaken is the one everyone obeys. Machiavelli never trusted emotion. He saw it not as a virtue to be admired, but as a tool to be used or a weakness to be exploited. In his world, feelings were not sacred. They were strategic. He studied kings, generals, and politicians who lost everything not because they lacked intelligence or power, but because they allowed emotion to cloud their decisions. They hesitated out of love. They lashed out in anger. They explained themselves to be understood. And in doing so, they gave away the very thing they needed to keep: control. To Machiavelli, emotion was a lever. Whoever controlled yours could move you, and whoever kept theirs hidden could move others. The man who stays calm while others panic, the man who holds his posture when insulted, the man who smiles when others expect rage, that man becomes unreadable. And the unreadable man is always feared. He didn't believe in showing strength through honesty. He believed in appearing strong through mastery. You could feel rage, but you don't show it. You could feel fear, but you don't name it. You could feel deeply and still, move like someone who feels nothing at all. Because in public, emotion is not an outlet, It's a vulnerability, and if your opponent can trigger it, they can control you without lifting a finger. Machiavelli understood something modern people forget. Power isn't about being your authentic self. It's about being your controlled self. The version of you that doesn't need to be understood. That doesn't flinch when provoked. That doesn't explain when attacked. A man who can carry emotion without exposing it is more dangerous than one who pretends he has none, because he sees the full game but never shows his hand. You don't need to erase your feelings, but you must learn to contain them, to delay them, to use them with precision. Your opponent should never know if they've made you angry, hurt you, or shaken your confidence. They should look into your face and see nothing but quiet calculation. That's what Machiavelli valued, not coldness, but control. This is why emotional immunity isn't about numbness. It's about weaponized composure. A silence that speaks louder than reaction. A smile that disguises strategy. A stillness that holds chaos beneath it but never lets it escape. When others rage, you wait. When they beg, you watch. When they try to pull emotion from you, you hand them nothing. And that nothing becomes unbearable. Machiavelli did not win by feeling less. He won by revealing less. And once you learn to do the same, you become untouchable, not because you're emotionless, but because your emotions belong to you and no one else. The moment you react, you hand over the frame. It doesn't matter how smart your response is, how justified your defense sounds, or how true your words might be. When you react, you've already lost, because now you're moving second. You're following their tempo. You're dancing to their rhythm. And the man who reacts cannot lead, he can only respond. Machiavelli knew this. The ruler is never the one who speaks first. It is the one who makes others speak. Reaction is submission disguised as engagement. You think you're standing up for yourself, correcting the narrative, defending your position. But underneath, you're proving something far worse. That they got to you, that their jab landed, that their words were important enough to shake your internal state. And once they know they can move you, they will never stop pressing. This is why the strong don't respond immediately. They observe. They withhold. They let the silence stretch so long that it becomes unsettling. While everyone else is scrambling to speak, to explain, to fill the space, the man who rules simply watches. His power isn't in what he says. It's in the fact that no one knows what he's thinking. And in that gap between what they throw at you and how you refuse to flinch, respect is born. Not the warm, friendly kind. The cold, sharp kind. The kind that makes people cautious. To stop reacting is not to stay silent forever. It is to move only when the move matters. It's to speak when your words will tilt the room, not when they'll merely echo emotion. Most people respond for relief. The Machiavellian responds for effect. He speaks not to defend himself, but to reframe the entire conversation. And sometimes that means waiting longer than most people can tolerate. Letting accusations float unanswered. Letting others assume, speculate, even escalate. Because the longer you stay still, the more their behavior reveals them, not you. The man who reacts cannot study. He cannot manipulate. He cannot lead. Because his attention is always pulled outward toward whatever poked him last. But the ruler, the untouchable one, he never leaves the center of his frame. He pulls others in, makes them adjust, makes them explain, makes them react. When you stop reacting, people stop treating you like a peer. They begin treating you like a presence, a weight in the room, a man who controls the rhythm even in silence. And once you have that, you don't need to raise your voice. You don't even need to speak, because now the room is already listening. Emotional distance is not cruelty, it is control. The moment you become too emotionally available, you become easy to read, easy to predict, easy to manipulate. People know what buttons to press. They know what provokes you, what flatters you, what hurts you, and that knowledge becomes power in their hand. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. The ruler must never reveal what he loves too openly, nor what he hates too clearly, because what is visible can be used, what is distant cannot. To be emotionally distant is to remain centered. It is not about building walls or becoming numb. It is about creating a deliberate space between how you feel and how you act. You can care deeply, but you do not show it impulsively. You can feel anger, but you do not raise your voice without calculation. You keep your emotions private not because you're weak, but because you're dangerous. The man who controls his inner world cannot be swayed by the outer one. He becomes stable in chaos, still in storms, and that stillness intimidates. Most people wear their hearts on their sleeves. They crave understanding, validation, emotional closeness. They confess too much, too soon. They explain their intentions. They over-apologize, over-correct, over-connect, all in the name of being authentic. But Machiavellian strategy has no space for emotional bleeding. To lead, to dominate, to remain untouchable, you must learn to keep parts of yourself inaccessible. Mystery creates weight. Emotional distance creates power. Think of the figures who command attention without speaking. They do not fidget. They do not fill the air with nervous laughter. They are present but untouchable. And that presence makes people chase them, because what is reserved becomes desirable. What is scarce becomes valuable. People do not respect the man who gives too much away. They respect the one who offers nothing without intention. This distance also protects you. When others lose control, they lash out, expose themselves, collapse under their own emotional gravity. But you calm, unreadable, composed, you remain the one who chooses when and how to engage. That restraint creates fear, because no one can tell what you'll do next. They don't know if you're amused or planning something colder, and in that space of not knowing, they behave, they adjust, they obey. Power is not always loud. Sometimes it is the quiet man in the corner who feels nothing publicly, says little intentionally, and still moves the room. That is emotional distance. That is immunity. And once you master it, you no longer need to demand respect. It surrounds you. Explaining your emotions is not connection, it's confession. The moment you begin to justify how you feel, you place yourself beneath the person you're explaining it to. You are asking for understanding, for leniency, for permission to feel. And whether you realize it or not, you've surrendered control. You've put the weight of your inner world into someone else's hands and hoped they'll carry it gently. Machiavelli would call that a fatal mistake. In power, vulnerability must be chosen, never leaked. You do not offer your emotions freely. You do not broadcast your every shift in mood, and you never explain your feelings unless it serves a larger move. Because most people don't want to understand you, they want to manage you. And the more you explain, the easier you are to manage. Weaponizing emotion means knowing how to feel everything, but reveal nothing. Or reveal it at the right moment, for the right reason, in a way that turns the frame in your favor. Think of the man who is silent for hours, then delivers one line of cold truth that cuts deeper than a monologue ever could. That is emotional strategy. That is the difference between expression and leverage. Most people chase sympathy. They want to be seen, to be affirmed, to be heard. And in doing so, they make their interior life public property. They show how they can be guilted, softened, manipulated. But the Machiavellian shows only what creates movement. He doesn't share his feelings, he deploys them, not to bond, but to break rhythm, not to connect, but to control. When others see you as emotionally opaque, they lean in, they begin to guess. They begin to fill in the blanks with their own projections. And this guessing gives you power. If they think you're angry, but you show calm, they adjust their tone. If they think you're hurt, but you don't flinch, they start to doubt their hit. The ambiguity becomes psychological pressure. You don't need to deny that you feel. But you must never feel out loud unless it tilts the game. A subtle pause, a quiet sigh, a shift in posture. Sometimes that says more than a full speech, and it puts the weight on them, not you. Because the man who cannot be read cannot be controlled, and the man who controls what others think he feels controls how they behave. So do not waste your feelings on validation. Weaponize them for impact. Make them wonder what you feel and fear what you don't. To be understood feels good. That's the trap. It feels like safety, like closeness, like connection. But in power, it is exposure. When people understand you too well, they stop fearing you. When they know your patterns, your limits, your pain points, they stop respecting the space around you. You become familiar, predictable, reachable, and in Machiavellian terms, that means vulnerable. The man who longs to be understood is always in conversation, always clarifying, always justifying, always hoping that someone will finally get him. But what he doesn't see is that every explanation he gives chips away at the mystery he needs to command obedience. The clearer he becomes, the easier he is to control. People use your openness to shape you. They learn what makes you flinch, what wins your trust, what can be used against you in a moment of weakness. And once they know the script, they can write your role for you. Machiavelli would tell you that power thrives in ambiguity, not because you're hiding something, but because people fear what they cannot fully map. When you are partially visible, partially silent, partially unknowable, you become larger in the minds of others. They begin to imagine you have depths they cannot see, and what the mind imagines is always more powerful than what it understands. The most dangerous men in history were not the ones who explained themselves. They were the ones who could not be easily read, the ones who left rooms full of questions. Think of how many leaders were feared more for their silence than their speeches. Not because they said nothing, but because they spoke sparingly and never to be understood, only to direct. If someone tells you they get you, that is not a compliment. That is a warning. It means your internal world is too exposed, your emotional patterns too obvious. And when someone understands you fully, they can begin to anticipate you. And once you're anticipated, you are no longer a strategist. You are a puppet. The man who is misunderstood, on the other hand, holds the board. His motives are questioned, not assumed. His silence speaks louder than his words, and when he finally does act, it feels like a move, not a reaction. Because he was never performing for understanding. In the first place, he was watching. Let them misunderstand you. Let them struggle to pin you down. Because once you become fully knowable, you become forgettable. Power is not about being known. It's about being watched closely, cautiously, from a distance no one can quite cross. Calm is mistaken for passivity. That's why it destroys people. In a world addicted to speed, emotion, and constant reaction, stillness is not just rare, it's terrifying. When you remain calm while others escalate, you disrupt their rhythm. You deny them the script they've rehearsed. And most people only know how to perform their roles if you play yours. When you refuse, their performance collapses. This is the quiet violence of composure. You don't need to shout. You don't need to argue. You don't even need to speak. Your lack of movement forces them to face themselves. The angrier they get, the more insane they look next to your stillness. The more they explain, the more obvious their desperation becomes. And you just breathe. Machiavelli understood that when someone loses control in your presence and you remain unchanged, you inherit the upper hand without touching a thing. Because power isn't always taken, it's surrendered. And people surrender it when they become emotionally exposed, while you stay closed. Most people are trained to believe calm is weakness, that if you don't react, you're losing. But in reality, calm makes people project strength onto you. They assume you know more than they do. They fear what you might be thinking. The silence becomes a mirror, and they begin to see their own insecurity reflected back. They replay the moment in their head 100 times, wondering why you didn't flinch. They interpret it as a message. They feel mocked without you mocking, judged without you judging, dominated without you speaking. The calm man holds a kind of cold gravity. Rooms slow down when he enters. People hesitate before speaking to him. He doesn't rush to fill silences, because he knows that silence is not absence. It is presence, concentrated. Every breath he takes feels deliberate. Every pause a form of pressure. And those around him begin to shape their tone, their behavior, their stories around that pressure. It is not enough to fake calm. You must be calm, because when it is real, it is unbearable for the chaotic. Your stillness reminds them of their noise. Your control magnifies their cracks, and they will break trying to get you to break with them. Do not move faster just because the room is loud. Slow it down by being the stillest one in it, because when everyone else is vibrating with emotion and you remain perfectly centered, they stop seeing you as a participant and start seeing you as something else entirely, something untouchable. The man who feels nothing cannot be provoked, and the man who cannot be provoked controls every room he enters. We are trained from birth to respond emotionally. Praise makes us beam. Insults make us tremble. Love makes us soften. Rejection makes us chase. And in those reactions, we give away the map. We expose where to hit us, how to bait us, how to break us. But the one who doesn't feel, or more precisely, the one who doesn't show what he feels, never hands over that map. He remains unreadable. And that unreadability becomes fearsome. To feel nothing is not to be inhuman. It is to be immune. Immune to provocation, to insult, to manipulation. Because in the world of power, emotional reactions are currency, and the first one to spend it always loses. The man who needs to explain his anger is already beneath the one who calmly caused it. The man who needs to declare his pain is already weaker than the one who ignored it. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He knew that power was not seized through noise, but through control. And the deepest control is self-control, the ability to hear your name dragged through the mud and say nothing. The ability to watch your enemy win a round and keep your face still. The ability to lose quietly so you can win later completely. You cannot dominate others until you dominate your own state. Emotional men are moved like pieces on a board. Unemotional men move the board itself. Because the moment someone tries to trigger you and finds nothing, no twitch, no tremor, no flame, they are left with their own weakness exposed. It is like trying to fight smoke. Their punches land on nothing. Their insults echo. Their accusations feel theatrical. And the crowd doesn't turn to them for leadership. It turns to the one who never flinched. People follow strength, but more importantly, they follow composure. And when they cannot tell what you feel, they assume you feel nothing. And when they assume you feel nothing, they stop trying to control you. Because now you are the one who becomes the trigger. Your silence becomes the loudest sound in the room. Your indifference becomes the sharpest edge. The man who feels nothing, or at least appears to, walks above the drama of the world. He watches others bleed over words. He sees rivals beg for understanding. He sees crowds rush to defend their emotions. And he says nothing. He does nothing. Because that is when he owns them all. Most people chase the emotions of others. They try to please, persuade, soothe, explain. They adjust their tone, their words, their posture, hoping to be understood, accepted, liked. But the man who controls power doesn't chase emotion. He makes the world chase his. This is not about being cold. It's about being centered. When your emotional state remains unaffected, untouched, and unreadable, others begin to orbit you. They search your face for clues. They dissect your silence for meaning. They replay what you said or didn't say, wondering what it meant. This uncertainty gives you gravity. People become obsessed with decoding you, and in that obsession, they hand you control. Machiavelli understood that emotions were not just feelings. They were weapons, levers, and illusions. If people think you are happy with them, they relax. If they think you are disappointed, they panic. If they think you're indifferent, they start working harder to impress you. But the key is to never reveal which is true. Let them sweat. Let them guess. Let them overperform, trying to win what they can't quite read. The mistake weak men make is trying to be emotionally clear. They think clarity is kindness, but clarity is also a vulnerability. When people know exactly how to make you happy or angry, they know how to control you. But when they don't know, when your face remains still and your tone remains level, they become careful. They walk lightly. They want your approval but are never sure they have it. That's the game. You must become the emotional standard. When others raise their voice, you lower yours. When they panic, you exhale. When they search your eyes for confirmation, you blink slowly. They are reacting to you now. They are measuring themselves against your stillness. And the longer you remain unmoved, the more powerful you seem. Silence, calm, and mystery are not empty. They are full of tension, full of suggestion, full of weight. And the man who can sit inside that space without trying to soften it gains something very few ever touch. Influence without effort, power without noise. Make them ask if you're angry. Make them wonder if they impressed you. Make them analyze your stillness like it's scripture. Because when your emotion becomes a rare signal, every flicker becomes valuable. Every smile becomes a reward. Every word becomes a message. You are no longer a person reacting to the world. You are a presence the world reacts to. The world chases what it cannot predict. Be that. Emotional immunity isn't a natural gift. It's not something you're born with. It's something you build quietly, slowly, in the furnace of silence. The man who does not react, who does not rush to defend, explain, or retaliate, is not empty. He is forged. The weak speak too soon. They feel a tremor in their ego and immediately fill the space with noise. Words, justifications, laughter, apologies, anything to escape the discomfort of not being understood. But silence is where immunity is born. Because silence forces you to confront yourself. No validation, no reassurance, just you. And the longer you can sit in that, the more powerful you become. Machiavelli knew this. Silence is not absence, it is containment. When you don't speak, you aren't passive. You are choosing. You are observing. You are reading the room while the room tries to read you. And in that moment, you gain control of the tempo. The man who can hold stillness, especially when others are unraveling, owns the frame. He becomes the one everyone watches. But most cannot handle silence. They fill it because they fear it. They see it as awkward, as weakness, as uncertainty. But silence in the hands of the powerful is not uncertainty, it's dominance. When you say nothing, others reveal themselves. They speak more than they should. They backpedal. They expose their insecurities, all while you remain still, untouched, unbothered. This is how emotional immunity is trained. Not by fighting feelings, but by mastering space. The space between the insult and your reaction. The space between their noise and your next move. You learn to let discomfort pass without flinching. You learn to observe without absorbing. You train your mind to hold tension without the need to relieve it. And the more you do this, the less anything shakes you. Silence becomes your armor, and not because you have nothing to say, but because you no longer need to say it. You no longer need to be understood. You no longer need the last word. You no longer need to prove you were right. You let others perform while you remain unmoved. And that distance between their emotion and your stillness, that's where fear grows. That's where respect is born. The man who is immune to emotional attack isn't emotionless. He simply doesn't leak. He doesn't give others access to his inner world. He feels everything but shows nothing. And in a world obsessed with reaction, that makes him untouchable. The most dangerous man in any room is the one no one can read. He smiles without warmth. He speaks without urgency. He listens without revealing whether he agrees or disagrees. His silence is not absence, it is a mirror. And in it, people see themselves reflected, distorted, judged. This is the power of emotional ambiguity. Not coldness, not cruelty, but the refusal to give anyone the comfort of certainty. Most people crave emotional clarity. They want to know if you like them, if you're angry, if you're impressed, if you're bored. They want signs, nods, reassurance, validation. And if you offer it too easily, you become predictable, you become manipulable. But when you wear the mask of emotional ambiguity, when your expression stays steady and unreadable, people start trying harder. They try to earn a reaction. They overperform. They seek your approval, even when they won't admit it. You control the frame without lifting a finger. Machiavelli understood that to lead without force, you must rule perception. And perception is built not just on what people see, but on what they think you might feel. The moment they think you're upset, they adjust. The moment they think you're pleased, they relax. But when they can't tell, when your emotional state stays hidden behind calm eyes and a still voice, they begin operating in uncertainty. And uncertainty makes people obedient. This mask is not deception. It's protection. It's discipline. It's knowing that your emotions are the most valuable currency you have, and spending them only when it buys something real. When people can't read your emotions, they assume you know something they don't. They assume you're calculating, powerful, in control. Even when you're silent, your presence speaks louder than their noise. But the real magic is in what this ambiguity does to your enemies. They can't trigger you. They can't shame you. They can't measure the effect of their attack. And in that confusion, they lose focus. They act out. They make mistakes. Because nothing unsettles the insecure more than a man who won't react the way they want him to. You are no longer a participant in their emotional game. You are a mirror that reflects their own instability, and they hate you for it, even as they fear you. To wear this mask well, you must train it. Learn to speak less. Respond slowly. Hold your face like it was carved from stone. Give no tells. Give no edge to grab. And over time, your mystery will harden into presence. Your presence will harden into power. And your power will move through every room you enter, like a cold wind unseen, but always felt. The more emotionally distant you become, the more people obsess over you. Not because they hate you, but because they don't understand you. And in that silence, in that space you refuse to close, their minds begin to work against them. They start to question, to spiral, to fill in the blanks. And every version they imagine is more powerful than the truth. Machiavelli knew the cost of being too available. The man who is too present, too eager, too emotionally open becomes common, predictable. His power fades the moment others feel they fully understand him. But the man who holds distance, who refuses to share everything, who withholds even his reactions, that man becomes myth. And myths are worshipped or feared, never ignored. Emotional distance is not cruelty, it is strategy. You are not punishing anyone by staying calm. You are commanding the tempo. You are forcing others to come to you. And in their pursuit, they become invested. Their identity begins to tie itself to your opinion. Your silence becomes louder than their voice. They interpret every look, every pause, every word you choose not to say. And in doing so, you make them chase you. Not for love, not even for approval, but for clarity they'll never receive. This is the psychological trap of distance. When you remove access to your emotional world, others assume it must be valuable, that there is something deeper, something hidden. They project their desires, their fears, their hopes onto you, and in doing so, they reveal themselves while knowing nothing of you. That imbalance is control. You can spot the weak by how badly they need to be known. They post their feelings online. They explain themselves to strangers. They offer full transparency as if it were a virtue. But transparency is only valuable when you're trying to be liked, not when you're trying to be obeyed. The man who holds emotional distance isn't cold, he's uncatchable. And that's what makes people obsess. They can't shake the feeling that there's more behind your eyes, that you've seen something they haven't, that your silence means you're calculating. And whether it's attraction, fear, respect, or hatred, they're all tethered to one need, to get closer to what you won't offer. And the moment they're chasing you emotionally, they're no longer in control. They shape themselves around your reactions, or your lack of them. They perform, they beg, they escalate, and the more you remain still, the more desperate they become. Emotional distance creates vacuum, and the human mind is addicted to filling vacuums. Machiavelli would tell you never fill the silence. Let it echo. Let it widen. Let them fall into it, searching for meaning, while you stand untouched. To become untouchable, you must stop living on the emotional terms of others. The world teaches you to explain, to prove, to soften your edges so you'll be accepted. But Machiavelli understood those who live for approval are ruled by those who withhold it. True power begins when you no longer respond to the moods, judgments, or accusations of the crowd. You become untouchable the moment you no longer need to be understood. The untouchable mindset is not emotionless. It's composed. You still feel. You still hurt. But you master one thing most people never do. You feel without flinching. You bleed without showing the wound. You learn to process pain like a secret, not a performance. Because once people know what gets to you, they'll press it again and again. Not always out of cruelty, sometimes out of curiosity, envy, or care, but it makes no difference. You've given away your switch. An untouchable man removes the switch entirely. His silence isn't passive, it's a choice. A fortress built of restraint. When others accuse, he doesn't explain. When they gossip, he doesn't chase the correction. When they beg for clarity, he offers ambiguity. Why? Because each time you explain yourself, you become smaller. Each time you ask to be seen, you become visible, and anything visible can be touched. But when you move without needing permission, when you speak without needing validation, when you hold your posture in storms that make other men scream, you become something else entirely. People begin to treat you like you know something they don't. They walk lighter around you. They second guess before they speak. They fear disappointing you, not because you punish, but because you don't flinch. That is the power of emotional immunity, and it does not come from being cold. It comes from choosing where your energy goes, who gets your reaction, and which part of yourself remains forever unrevealed. Most men expose themselves too soon. They share everything. They want to be relatable. They want to be liked. But in their quest for emotional transparency, they become forgettable. The untouchable mindset is the opposite. It is a deliberate refusal to be ordinary. You don't show what breaks you. You don't reward disrespect with access. You don't chase after misinterpretations. You let people think what they want. And in that space, you become legend. You become myth. You become the man they cannot rattle, cannot read, cannot reduce. Machiavelli would say, never play a game where you don't control the board. And in the game of power, emotion is the board. He who reacts loses. He who explains submits. But he who observes remains still and chooses silence like a blade. He is untouchable. Like this video, subscribe to Dark Blue Psychology and turn on notifications. The game of power never ends. Watch the next video now.